Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to present our paper is real-time phishing eliminated with FIDO. I am Enis Ulqinaku and this is a joint work with Hala, Assal, AbdelRahman, Abdou, Sonia, Chiasson, and Srdjan. So for a long time, online user authentication has been based on passwords, but as the many research works have shown, like passwords have many vulnerabilities. They are weak. Usually they have low entropy. Users also like to reuse the same passwords on multiple websites. So if one of them is compromised, then the user password is leaked and potentially all the users' accounts are compromised as well. Also, they are vulnerable to keyloggers, but one specific attack vector that we are interested in, we focus in this paper is phishing. Phishing has been going on for a while, and initially the phishing websites were like very simple. They would collect the user credentials and then the attackers would exploit them later. And such attacks are cheap and scalable. And in order to prevent from such attack vectors, but also from other attacks, service providers started to deploy two-factor authentications, which usually require for a OTP, like one-time password, via some special hardware or even some SMS or smartphones. Soon after that, also attackers advanced their tools and actually they developed like real-time phishing, which is able also to bypass two-factor authentication. And such tools are also cheap and scalable. And so after that, the industry reacted with simpler and stronger authentication, which is called FIDO, Fast Identity Online. And this is meant especially to counter phishing attacks. However, in this paper, we ask if a real phishing attack is still possible also with FIDO in place, and if such attacks are cheap and scalable as well. Now I will present the main goals of FIDO. FIDO aims to provide secure authentication, which is also privacy preserving. Also, it aims to be easy to use and scalable as well. Statement from FIDO, which captures nicely all the goals that the FIDO aims to achieve. It's like this one from the FIDO Alliance, which says that FIDO2 cryptographic login credentials are unique across every website, never leave the user's device, and are never stored on a server. And they claim that this security model eliminates the risk of phishing, all forms of password theft, and replay attacks. So as an overview to understand the trusted entities that the FIDO assumes are the FIDO servers, which are going to authenticate the users. It is also the client software and the host of the user, so which means that the browser supports some specific APIs, but also there are no malicious applications running on the user's host. And the last trusted part is the authenticators, or as they are known as security keys. And the security key might be a hardware device, a smartphone, or even a smartwatch. Also, FIDO assumes trust on first use, which means the enrollment is trusted. And during this process, the user enrolls its authenticator or the security key to the server. So it starts with request from the browser, and then the server will reply with some username and challenge, like announce and some optional data if necessary. And it is important to note that the browser will forward such data to the authenticator, and it will append the app ID, which is linked to the domain that the user is visiting right now. So if the user is visiting a phishing domain, then the browser will send the phishing domain to the authenticator. And in the end, the user has to click to the authenticator in order to generate a signature, which is then sent to the browser, and the browser sends this to the server. Now the server has the public key of the user's authenticator. Then after the user has enrolled its security key, now the user can log in using FIDO to his account. And again, the flow is quite similar to enrollment. Again, it starts with a login request from the browser, and then the server replies with some data, username and nodes. And again, the browser now appends the app ID, which is linked to a domain that the user is currently visiting. And the user will click in the authenticator or touch it depending on the model. And this will trigger the signature computation, which then is sent to the browser, and the browser forwards this to the server. So if the user is visiting some phishing website, at this point, the browser would send the phishing app ID, and the device would sign the phishing app ID, which should be invalid for the legitimate server. And in the end, the server will verify the signature, And if the signature is correct and the user has been in the correct app ID, it means that the server will give access to the user. And at this point, the FIDO protocol ends. However, if the user is interacting with a malicious website, it means that now the malicious website or the phishing website can show any arbitrary feedback to the user. And since the FIDO doesn't assume any secure feedback, this allows an attacker to render the usual success message for FIDO to the user, and the user has no way how to prove if the successful message is true or not. And potentially by seeing a success message for the FIDO step, the user gets a false sense of security. Another weakness on the real deployment is that recovery and fallbacks are really necessary. So FIDO makes a trade-off of by favoring the security and usability versus availability. But this means that the servers should have also a secure recovery at scale, which is a difficult task. And mostly, like a common practice for service providers is to rely on weaker 2FAs. But it is important to note that all such two-factor authentications are vulnerable to phishing. So we inspected the Alexa top 100 websites, and actually we noticed that 23 of them support FIDO, and 14 of these websites are partners of FIDO as well. However, all of them allow alternatives to FIDO, and even some of them ask the users to enroll an alternative just in case the user will misplace or lose the security key in the future, so they have another way to authenticate. And given this deployment by almost all the websites, then we ask the questions like, does FIDO really eliminate the phishing? Or is FIDO enough to secure a user account? And also, what is the security of FIDO and other 2FAs? So here are some screenshots from the Google login page. And here we have a user that has enrolled FIDO to his account. And as you see, after the user has entered the username and password, the user is asked for a FIDO token. And however, the user can still click cancel here, and then it will be presented with a list of other two-factor authentication that can log into the website. And if the user clicks, for example, here in the Google Authenticator app, then the user sees this page, which asks for the OTP, but also which is phishable. In this diagram, we present an overview of our attack that we based on these two weaknesses that I presented earlier. The first one is the lack of secure feedback, and the other is the presence of the alternatives. And here is the detailed workflow of the attack. But on a high level, I would like to say that the first part of the attack, it exploits the lack of secure feedback to the user from FIDO. So it potentially gives a false sense of security to the user, while the second part is an interaction between the attacker and the server only, where the attacker asks the server to downgrade the two-factor authentication, while the second part is a typical phishing attack where the attacker gets the OTP from the user and forwards it to the server. So what is important to note here is that all these three parts are easy to scale, so an attacker can automate the process and also target hundreds or thousands or millions of users that are FIDO users as well. In order to evaluate the effectiveness of the attack that we presented, we performed a user study. In our paper, we detail our reasoning for the study design and the scenario, but on a high level, I would like to say that our user study is based in a role-playing experiment and a semi-structured interview, which lasted around 1 hour. And as a scenario, we assume each participant is a new employee in a tech company. And also each participant receives 15 emails for which are phishing attacks. In total, we had 51 participants. In order to evaluate the results, of course, we didn't just consider as falling for phishing all participants that just submitted the credentials that we provided to them, because this was a role-playing scenario. For that, we classify participants as aware of phishing or unaware of phishing, and aware participants is someone that named at least one phishing email from the 15 that we sent to them, or they named the true phishing indicators, such as the mismatch in the domain name or something similar. And as a result, we had 4 cases. And yes, in case one, the participants falling in this category, they are susceptible to phishing. And actually, they are 55% of our total participants in the user study. The user study shows that the attack that we presented earlier in the paper is quite effective, and actually the users, even by using FIDO, they are still potentially vulnerable to phishing. So in the paper also we discussed some possible countermeasures, but I would like to note that this is not an easy problem. So also there are no simple solution to that one. So a trivial countermeasure would be to disable any weaker alternatives. Another countermeasure could be risk-based authentication, but still also this is not foolproof. Another solution would be like if the browser would provide additional hints. The question is, what is the added value of the FIDO? Because if we had such a browser hints, then any 2FA would be secure enough to prevent against the phishing. So the only way that we can have a real countermeasure is to have a secure login and also recovery alternative, because basically the login and the recovery or the fallbacks or alternatives, they are different sides of the same coin. The last countermeasure maybe is user education. This is plausible, but yet it's somehow ineffective. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. So thank you for your attention.